one day we could watch the sunrise together. It did remind me of you.
What?
What? I didn't say anything.
And it's fantastically homoerotic.
So, in a delightful turn of events, I was contacted by the nerds over at Party of Introverts and Akupara Games for early access to Cabernet, which excited me since I already had the game wishlisted after seeing it on the Clock app. It looked neat, I was intrigued, and I'm always down for a vampire game. If I hadn't been caught up in my own stuff, this might have come out a little sooner, but I have finished my playthrough and I'm ready to talk about it. What is Cabernet, you may ask? It's a narrative game where you play as Liza, a newly awakened vampire residing in a fictional Eastern European country at the end of the 19th century. You have to navigate social circles and the political strife of the time, as charm and cunning play a much larger role in your survival compared to brute force. In fact, there's not really any combat at all. You won't be steamrolling anyone to get your way despite being a vampire, which is oddly refreshing. That isn't to say everything is solved with diplomacy and no one dies. People can and do die throughout the game depending on your actions, whether that's through draining someone dry, murdering them with a fishbone dagger, or leaving them trapped somewhere they'll burn come sunrise. Each night is spent interacting with the people in your relationship map and handling quests, exploring the town, finding what you need, doing tasks for your boss, and eventually working your way to figuring out what's going on behind the scenes. How you go about this is up to you, but there are certain interactions that take up a significant chunk of time or action points, of which you have 3 to spend during a given night. Once you hit the dawn stage, you have to rush back home to your vessel, the coffin you were buried in, to avoid being burned to final death. See, the game uses certain vampiric rules to enforce gameplay, such as needing an invitation to enter someone's home or private premises like the back room of a bar, meaning you need to charm your way to get access. Similarly, whilst vampires can enchant someone to influence them or feed on them, that someone needs to like them in the first place, again necessitating the need for social skills and wherewithal. Naturally, this can lead to some thorny situations when it comes to manipulation and consent. By your very nature, you are a predator moving amidst prey, deftly situating yourself to either slake your thirst or acquire something else you need from that person, like an item they possess.
On a personal note, though, it may not always be better to pick who you like more. When it comes to the hunt, it's those who you get close to that get hurt. Just something to consider.
I would highly recommend the game because the writing is good, the voice acting is great, and I was very taken in by the atmosphere and music. I loved reading through all the little tidbits you get on historical phrases or lore used in the story. I would have happily spent the 16 quid it is on Steam to enjoy it, even if Party of Introverts hadn't sent me a code. On the less positive side of things, I didn't encounter all that much, but there were some small bits of visual jank, and the handful of times I accidentally broke the map a little when I was flying as a bat and I'd land on a strip of ground that I really wasn't supposed to have landed on because I would need to fly again if I wanted to escape it. The epilogue section also suffered from multiple audio misfires when it came to dialogue, like the wrong line activated, but it ultimately wasn't enough to not leave me sobbing at my desk after I finished, and there have already been a few patches to address these issues. Now, if you want to experience the game for yourself without any further spoilers, deplane immediately and go play it. It's a good game. It made me cry, but it also made me kick my feet and giggle because something cute just happened. And if you do stay, we're just going to talk about what I experienced and the parts that stood out to me the most without spoiling everyone's personal stories. And I'll give you another warning before I talk about the endgame, so you can experience that for yourself if you so wish. I will still avoid specific details about what happens. For my part, I played Liza heavily leaning towards humanity over nihilism, so most of the time I did my best to help people, which is how I got the ending I did. You can, however, end up in a much darker place if you so choose. Is that all understood? Those of you still here are fine with spoilers? Alright, let's get into it, shall we? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below for the algorithm gods. Our journey begins at the funeral for one Elizaveta Morozova, where her uncle Mitko guides us through choosing our starting skills by talking about how Liza was in life. Those skills being arts and music, literature, logic and science, and history and politics, each of which play a vital role in what you can say in conversations and opening different paths depending on your skill level. This introduction neatly avoids telling us how she died and paints the picture of a dedicated, intelligent, and scientifically minded young woman taken before she could reach her full potential as a doctor, and during this time in history that was especially noteworthy. The way Uncle Mitko stutters when mentioning Liza's parents instead of just her mother implies some manner of family strife which will become extremely relevant later on and persist in smaller reminders throughout the story, which led to me fastidiously avoiding having Liza drink any kind of alcohol throughout the entire thing because Homegirl does not need the reminder. As per tradition, however, Mitko, her mother Nadezhda, and her younger brother Kolya all drink a shot of vodka as a send-off, and we fade to black. Only for Liza to begin talking, blood slowly dripping as she remembers a lullaby her mother would sing when she couldn't sleep, a tune that will become very familiar over the course of the story. Coming to with a gasp, Liza finds herself in a dark basement, disheveled, pale, and unfamiliar in her own body. She can hardly see if not for a lantern. There's a bucket of blood next to the cot she was sleeping in, and the door to the room is locked. When she can't leave, she ends up drawing the attention of a strange and silent presence on the other side of the door that promises to release her in exchange for a favor, burning an ominous green mark into her shoulder before opening the door and vanishing. With that sinister business out of the way, Liza is free to stumble her way out of the eerie dungeon, nicking some coin along the way if you so choose, which I did because for all I know someone just abducted me, so fuck them for leaving money down here, and yes, I am mildly salty that this action counts as nihilistic, even if I know, in hindsight, that I was stealing. Context is everything. Uncovering a mirror down here reveals that Liza doesn't have a reflection anymore, which, at the time, she attributes to it just being a trick mirror, because that is honestly the most rational thought to have, instead of jumping straight to, oh yeah, vampires are real actually, and I'm one of them now. Anyway, we find some stairs and emerge into a ballroom filled with people who aren't concerned about Lisa's appearance beyond criticizing it. One of the only people to actually show compassion right away is a young human man, and it soon becomes apparent that almost everyone here is a vampire. We end up talking to Countess Orlova, whose manor we're currently standing in, and Husa, her right-hand man. The Countess hands Liza her glass and tells her to drink it without telling her what exactly it is, frustrated at Husa for Liza's fresh-from-the-ground state and lack of induction, though he does remark that we weren't meant to wake up yet. With our glass full, and the floor no longer feeling like it's about to slide out from under us, we get cleaned up, slip into much nicer clothes than our dirtied nightgown, and start learning about what fresh hell we've just woken up to. Finding Husa smoking out on the balcony, he informs Liza that she and almost everyone else at the manor is a vampire. We learn about death amnesia, which is when the newly turned forget how exactly they died, only regaining the memory at a later date when the trauma won't be as fresh and disturbing for them. We are now part of higher society, what the organized vampiric population calls itself, and as might be expected, Liza is forbidden from contacting her family, since that would endanger not just them, but all vampires as well. Humans aren't exactly known for restraint when an animal that needs to eat kills livestock. Something that directly preys on humans won't be given any mercy. The thing is, Hussar isn't super keen on being our chaperone, so he foists Liza off on the other party guests rather than answer any questions. If there's anything practical to be taught by doing, he'll do it, but explaining things with words out of your mouth, With enough points in history, however, he can be convinced to tell us about some of the people here, namely Arban, a kindly woman from the Far East, Alyssa, an intense and important figure here, and Petya, the sole human in attendance and the one who showed immediate concern for Liza's well-being. He was brought along by Alyssa for fun and has absolutely no idea the danger he's in, which we can comment on because what the fuck? Anyway, inside we can talk to the aforementioned guests and learn a bit more about our situation. We find Alyssa trying not to die of boredom by way of asking to play Russian roulette with some of the other guests, who politely turn down the offer. She is also voiced by Samantha Baert, otherwise known as Karlak from Baldur's Gate 3. Speaking to her shows us someone ground down by the monotony of having all the time in the world, weary, sarcastic, and hungry for something to, in her own words, spice up the eternity. Which is why Petya is currently playing the hapless lamb among wolves. Aside from learning a few important things about vampires, such as burning up in the sun and being able to live forever if nothing drastic happens to their body, Alyssa prompts us with a question of value. Is our existence more valuable because we have forever? I answered no, it's the same, and Alyssa followed this up by asking us to compare our existence to Petya's. Is our existence just as valuable to that of a human, more valuable, or less? I answered that they were equal in value. Having more time doesn't necessarily mean you'll make good use of it. Breaking off from the conversation, we can talk to Arban next, who is on the opposite end of the humanity nihilism scale to Alyssa. She is warm and kind and concerned with Liza's well-being, telling her to be careful how she handles her thirst for blood, and even offering a small vial of it to help her stay in good health. She specifically brings up alcoholism in the context of drinking Cabernet, the vampiric code word for human blood, as she noticed how eagerly Liza drank what the Countess gave her. This is where we can learn that Liza's father was indeed an alcoholic, and while alcohol itself is something Liza can avoid, blood is non-negotiable, and addiction, well...
Demons are hereditary, my dear. Always remember that.
We can visit Arban later in her literary salon in town, and it'll be where we can get a hold of bottled blood should we need it, so that's useful. The last person we talk to is Petya, a doll maker and the oblivious human in the room. He is awkward, kind, and earnest, asking for our opinion on his craft, which we can be nice about or crush him. And I was middle of the road because dolls creep the shit out of me, but I didn't really want to hurt his feelings. His dad is a dick who never supported his work in doll making because it simply wasn't manly enough, and therefore I ended up adopting this sweet boy because how dare you? Returning to Hussar, he shows us how to transform into a bat and brings us out to the forest to show us what enchanting and feeding on a human looks like. The poor sod targeted for this is an older man called Trofim, one of the Countess's coachmen, and while I may have messed up and not realized I had to hold something down to feed on him, the game took note of it, and Hussar thought I was just being reluctant. Which, honestly, the Countess already gave Liza a drink, so feeding on Trofim probably would have sent her over the edge into blood-drunk territory. What is that? Well, it ties into what Arban meant. Drink too much at once and a vampire will feel a powerful high, gaining a boost to their skills and abilities. But doing so permanently increases how much blood they need day to day. For some, chasing the high and the feeling of power becomes an addiction, eventually resulting in the vampire losing all control of their bloodlust and becoming a mindless feral. It might not be alcohol. You need it to live, but the danger is still there. The demon is still waiting for you to slip up and indulge its promise of comfort and power. Regardless, while humans are enchanted, they can be given commands to influence their subconscious behavior, bringing up the manipulation and consent issues I mentioned earlier, but again, we are a vampire, something that predates on humankind as a matter of survival. In Trofim's case, I told him to ease up on the vodka, so at the very least, you can influence people out of self-destructive behaviors. We hear a scream on our way back to the manor and head inside to find that a trio of guests killed Petya by draining him like a Capri Sun. They're more concerned about the consequences of killing someone in the Countess's manor rather than the actual murder itself, which we can pass judgment on, but ultimately Arban gently takes Liza aside with the remark that this isn't her mess to sort out. She offers words of comfort and encourages Liza to keep her head down and read some books until she's called for. Reading books takes an action point, but it does boost our stats, and the bigger the boost, the longer it takes to finish the book. Our reading is interrupted by another commotion in the ballroom, and we emerge to find that Alyssa straight up ripped Victoria's fangs out of her mouth for killing Petya. The most we were told would happen to her and the other two was having their fangs dulled, which would grow back in a month or so. Having them fully removed, well, she's not going to have a great time surviving. This is the point in the game where you'll start to see this little symbol of a splitting arrow up in the corner, indicating that what you've said will have an impact somewhere down the line. The weight of that impact and when it happens is another matter, but this first section teaches you most of what you'll need to know about the rest of the game, including the consequences of your actions. While we can be kind and consoling to Alyssa about what happened, this is also the part where I started experiencing bouts of gay panic because I was not prepared to hear Karlak's voice say,
I understand.
Good girl.
Taking Matilda the doll with us, so Alyssa doesn't have to look at it anymore, we head down so that Trofim can take us away from the manor and to our new home with the doctor who turned us. We're to be his new apprentice, which is why he turned us in the first place. Not that Liza can remember much about that right now. We meet Dr. Volkov while he's just finishing up with a patient, an older woman called Faina, who is our downstairs neighbour in this building. She is a sweet, patient, kind old lady who takes care of plants, feeds the birds, and gives us tea. She has never done anything wrong in her life ever, and I love her. This is the point in the game where we are finally free to begin exploring and interacting with people at our own pace. For the most part, anyway. By way of hussar, we're given a task by the Countess. There's a newlywed couple in town, and the husband is related to our mayor, who keeps important documents secured in their house. Our job is to befriend the husband or the wife so that we're invited into their home. That way we can retrieve those documents for the Countess. The husband is a struggling poet called Evgeny, who always spends his time at Arbin's literary salon or at the vodka bar getting blasted the later at night it is. The wife is Anastasia, a talented musician who used to work and tour the country before they moved to this town for the sake of the writing Evgeny isn't doing. She has a small music school in town where she teaches for half the week, but longs to create her own songs and work again.
Brother,
Now, if you know anything about me, you know exactly how I decided to handle this situation, because a woman giving up her passions and career for a man who spends what little money they don't have on booze and doesn't even do the goddamn work they moved here for him to do? We don't do that in this house.
This is so cringe. Guilty.
Yes, it's more nuanced and complicated than that, but I have a very good reason for doing this. You see,
gay.
while you can look at the documents, I didn't and simply handed them over, which I will probably change when I play this again just to see what happens. Most of your time between the main quest will be taken up by talking to different people, doing tasks for the doctor as his apprentice, advancing the personal stories of different characters, and just trying to stay on top of your need for blood. Your first instance of feeding someone in the wild, as it were, will come from interacting with Anastasia or Evgeny, where there seems to be a scripted moment of Liza becoming low on blood and seeing one of them alone, whereupon her predatory instincts start to kick in, and I try my absolute most not to see something fruity in the way Liza talks about Anastasia.
There she is. Her skin looks so beautiful in the moonlight. I can smell her flesh from all the way over here. I need to taste her. I need to feed.
It's like, I need to impress upon you that I was trying very hard not to expect anything from this game when it came to fruity options until I got something inarguable like flirting or a kiss. So until then, anytime something like this happened, I was metaphorically trying to wrench the Yuri goggles off my face so I wouldn't be disappointed if I turned out to just be reading into things too much. Mercifully, that wasn't the case.
Please, feel free to stay and practice though. You're still always welcome to play here, of course. Who could resist looking at your beautiful fingers touching the ivory? Excuse me. I didn't mean it like that.
Well, that would be a real shame. I was hoping you enjoyed looking at them. They're rather soft as well.
They do. I couldn't help but notice when I directed your hand on the keyboard. Well, I must run. There's an errand I have to attend to that I completely forgot about.
Gay.
Anyway, Evgeny walked in after we learn how to enchant for the first time, and he sees his wife zoned out, immediately suspicious and angry at us for whatever we've done to cause this. We can attempt to enchant him too, but that just makes us look erratic as shit when we start singing out of nowhere and it doesn't work on him. Thankfully, for once, Hussar was following us to keep an eye on things and swoops down to enchant Evgeny and get us out of the situation, since enchantment induces memory loss of the minutes just before and after it happens. With that first task out of the way, we continue building relationships with the town's people, exploring different areas such as Lover's Island and discovering Alyssa's secret hookah bar there, and preparing ourselves for a festival known as Kupala Night. Why are we concerned with this? Remember that mystery presence that released us from the dungeon in exchange for a favor? Yeah, turns out that was likely a creature known as a Nav, and they're most active during this festival, which is why everyone has been hanging wreaths on their door, a superstitious tradition to protect them from evil. This is also one of the busiest nights for Dr. Volkov, but wouldn't you know it, he has other business to attend to and needs us to fill in for him, which he lets us know the day of! You'll notice over the course of the game that the Doctor becomes progressively unwell, and it won't be until later that we understand what's happening to him, which we can resolve in a few ways depending on how much you've accomplished at that point. Back to the spooky night in question, we were called out to resuscitate a drowned teenager after he was attacked by something in the lake, which I was able to do in time by using bat form to reach his location quicker. After this, we stay to keep an eye on the festival, right up until some spooky bullshit happens, and we're drawn into the forest by a creepy green light. Our mysterious savior from the beginning, who I initially called Dracula as a joke because, well, look at him. But no, this is Dragomir, and he is vampiric nihilism embodied, a predator who toys with everyone weaker than him, and who wants to shove Liza into embracing those aspects within herself. He's cashing in on the favor we owe, and in return for no longer being in debt to him, he just wants us to choose someone we care about, and burn the wreath at their door, which will result in their death. The night's events have taken up all our action points by now, so Liza is forced to choose if she wants out of this creature's influence, while racing against the clock to get back home before sunrise so she doesn't perish. I won't spoil how you can handle this. All I'll say is that if you've done the work of making friends with people around town and researched how to protect against creatures like Dragomir, then the solution to this impossible situation becomes obvious. At the time, I was frantic until I realized what I could do and said out loud, "Get fucked, actually." After Kupala Night, we have a period of further exploration around town and learn how Arban gets her supply of blood through a couple of volunteers from a revolutionary group. And by revolutionary, I mean capital R revolutionists who want to upturn society to wash away all the injustice and corruption. Understandable. The two volunteers, Gosha and Ivan, think they're donating blood to help Dr. Volkov's medical research, which they are. But, they're also unknowingly feeding some of the local vampire population. They just, they don't need to know that part. We're invited to talk to them later in the week at the vodka bar, which they use as their unofficial hub in town because it's where the poor and working class gather, instead of Arban's fancy-smanchy literary salon. Upon speaking to them, it's quickly apparent that Ivan is an ends justify the means type, bluntly stating that sacrifices must be made for real change to happen, which is kind of funny because sacrificing your life for the cause is indeed a sacrifice because it costs you something personally, but sacrificing the lives of innocent people to achieve your goal is, I believe in legal terms, fucking murder. And while he talks big about overturning corrupt hierarchy and making things better for everyone, he still just expects Gosha to get the drinks and will write off her arguing with him about collateral damage, as you know how women get. It's always especially disappointing when an otherwise progressive man reminds you he is in fact a man. Anyways, the point here is to introduce us to the political strife of the time, seeing as serfdom ended not so long ago, and things don't really seem to have gotten all that better. The people who own everything still own everything and sit at the top of the pile as they always have, and the people who don't. It's really frustrating that this is not an outdated argument to be having. After arguing with a local man who overheard our conversation and confronts Ivan with an entirely valid point about how his idea of direct action can directly ruin the lives of the people he's supposed to be trying to help, which he refuses to internalize because he is always correct, of course, we leave to attend a rally being held outside Town Hall. See, the previous mayor of the town was deeply corrupt, leading to many families like Gosha's going hungry and losing work. The rally is meant to show the new mayor that the people haven't forgotten and mean business when it comes to expecting better of their government. Upon arrival, Liza is ushered inside by Victoria, the woman who drank Pecha dry, and who looks rather worse for wear after Alyssa ripped her fangs out. Inside, we end up talking to the mayor and the countess upstairs. The mayor puts on a friendly, optimistic front, while the countess is far more honest about her disdain for the common folk. Rather than the countess calling us up for simple pleasantries, however, she hands us a letter for Dr. Volkov and tries to send us on our way, only for the mayor to invite us to stand with him while he addresses the rally. If you've already guessed that something is about to go horribly wrong, congratulations. In the middle of addressing the rally from his balcony, the mayor is shot at, causing panic and chaos to break out, amidst which Liza sees her little brother, Kolya.
Liza?
This is fine. Rushing away from the rally before things get worse, we can try to intervene when we see Kolya being roughed up by the police, but I chose to avoid him because goddammit kid, you are not supposed to know your sister is still alive or it'll get you both killed. Unfortunately, because we work for the doctor, it's the first place he runs to for help with his head injury. We can successfully treat him, letting him rest a while in Liza's room, and whether or not we tell him the truth, he's ultimately found by the police and taken away Lord knows where, though not without leaving us a note. See, Kolya was at the rally because since Liza's supposed death, their father's drinking only got worse, and Kolya finally lost his patience with it after a particularly bad night, leaving to try and do something worthwhile. That turned out to be joining the revolutionaries. And just as an aside, out of everything else that happens in this game, the scene of Kolya being forced to sit down with his drunk father and talk to him was the single most distinctly uncomfortable conversation in the game. Really, the most uncomfortable conversation in any game that I've ever been through. A volatile, inebriated parent trying to exert some kind of familial authority, experience, knowledge, control over their child who has been forced to grow up far, far too fast because they know they can't rely on the adult in their life to provide stability. It was effectively done. So, Kolya began acting as a courier for the revolutionaries, delivering packages they needed, no questions asked. But thanks to the rally, he couldn't deliver his latest package, and he asks Liza to complete the delivery for him, telling her where he stashed it. A parcel that you can easily deduce is a bomb. I decided not to deliver it because I didn't fucking trust Ivan with explosives, considering how little of a shit he gave about all the people brutalized at the rally and how psyched he was over a random stranger trying to assassinate the new mayor sight unseen.
Fine, forget the mayor for a second. What about the arrests?
Come on now, I bailed you out, didn't I? Look, as long as you're with me, there is nothing to worry about.
Yes, but what about the dozens of innocent people? What about the members of our crew that got taken away?
Well, what about them?
We still have no idea where they are. Doesn't this bother you?
Do I really have to explain that to you, Gosha?
My brother in Christ, this cavalier attitude to collateral damage is exactly how you lose people. At least pretend to give a shit. Develop some PR. Anyway, we can ask the revolutionaries about where the arrested may have been taken, since Kolya would be amongst them, which ordinarily wouldn't take much digging because police can be bribed, and without a local jail in town they would have been shipped somewhere. This time, it's like all those arrested at the rally simply vanished. Ivan has something else he needs to do and leaves us alone with the random stranger, Maxime, who drunkenly relays to us that he was actually bribed by a woman with a scarred face to shoot at the mayor. Or rather, shoot out one of the windows near him to make it look like he was a target. A lady with auburn hair and a scarred face. Oh, you motherfucker. So, yeah, turns out events were manipulated by the Countess, not surprising when you think about it, but at the same time, to what end? Pursuing this clue to the Countess's manor will lock you into the Endgame, which is thankfully signposted to you before you can commit, allowing you to finish up any remaining character stories you've yet to complete. I've mostly been skirting around these stories because I was enthralled by most of them, and at one point in the game I was hit with a 1-2 punch of experiencing the end of 2 characters' stories on the same night, which left me crying for a good 10 minutes afterwards, so like, trust me that I really want you guys to go experience the emotional highs and lows for yourselves. What I will say personally is that Arben, Faina, Elisa, and Anastasia were my favourites, the first 2 for being kind and supportive elements in Liza's turbulent new existence, and Elisa and Anastasia for extremely zesty reasons. But seriously, Elisa and Anastasia are both compelling characters that I'm glad I got to know, especially since if you do things correctly, Elisa will still be there with Liza in the epilogue, and they will refer to each other with the pet names My Queen and My Princess, respectively, which tells me all I need to know about how their dynamic evolves. What were we talking about? Right, the Endgame. For me, I tailed Victoria through the Countess's manor, stole some important documents regarding construction the mayor was doing under Town Hall, along with some very questionable charts and a list of people referred to as parasites, some with deceased next to their names, multiple of which we can recognize. Returning to town, we can find Yvonne outside Town Hall with a suspiciously empty bucket and no Gosha in sight, because the bastards sold her out after they had a falling out over how to move forward with the cause. Not that he tells us that! He tries to make some point about how hard it must have been for Liza to earn her degree in medicine as a woman, and how he was never a gifted child, so he turned to politics to make something of himself, and just... fuck you, man, you've committed the unforgivable crime of getting on my nerves.
Move, I'm gay.
Heading into the building, we run into the Countess inside the mayor's office, and in talking to her, you can achieve one of the game's endings depending on how loyal you've been to her and how nihilistic you play Liza. Getting out of that conversation, she leaves us alone in the office and we're free to investigate it, eventually discovering through an old painting that there's a hidden door behind the bookcase. The puzzle to unlock this took a few attempts on my part, not just to figure out what these marked letters spell out, but the order in which I had to choose the corresponding books that they point to. Godspeed when you get to this point. Beyond this hidden door is where we will discover exactly what happened to the people arrested at the rally, along with many others who were also rounded up as parasites, the unemployed of the town. It's here where we also finally learn how Liza died and why the doctor chose her as his apprentice. And it's here where we can have the second most uncomfortable conversation in the game, as the extent of the real villain's worldview and plans are laid out for us in all their maddeningly capitalistic cruelty. Now, this confrontation can go a couple of ways. One where you become complicit in the brutality visited upon innumerable innocents, which gives you a tellingly abrupt and bleak ending, or the one where you don't, and end up in a jail cell with everyone else. From there, you can either escape, or make another deal with Dragomir, which requires a lot of nihilism, high approval with him, and doing exactly as he asked earlier with no tricks. What happens when you align with him? Let's just say that things get heated. Not in a fun way. Unless you're a pyro, then it is a fun way. I, however, escaped and survived the ensuing fire, because without the bomb being delivered, Ivan decided the next best thing for his revolution was setting the town hall ablaze. Damn whatever innocents get caught in the crossfire. Prick. While we don't see the immediate aftermath of this event, we do get an epilogue that I really wasn't expecting and deeply appreciated. Because after surviving all of that, we're suddenly pushed forward to the year 1999, New Year's Eve. I did not expect this section to hit me as hard as it did, with Liza surviving to see the arrival of the new millennium, remembering all the people she once knew, how things turned out for them over the century, and finally being able to walk into the town church and light candles, not just for her long-dead family, but also for having hope in troubled times, which is a message I really needed to hear. The game is unquestionably political, dealing directly with the power plays of those at the top, the consequences felt by those beneath, and the inevitable outcry at the injustice of it all, echoing into the present-day concerns of Eastern Europe by the end. It actually reminded me a little bit of the engineer's speech at the end of A Machine for Pigs, raging against the misery and horrors that would unfold in the 20th century, and the answering rejection of his planned oblivion, because despite all of the darkness, there will still be a light. which I think is something many of us could use a reminder of. And with that, we are done with Cabernet. I hope you enjoyed this different approach. I really wanted to give you guys a good taste of what the game was about without, divulging all of its secrets, because I cannot stress enough how much I want other people to experience it as well. Please. I'm dying in a sea of emotions here. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below for the algorithm gods. Special shout out to my supporters over on Patreon who are all very handsome people. If you'd also like to be called a very handsome people, check out the link in the description where you can support me from just £1 a month. All tiers get their name in the credits, while members of the Nerd tier will occasionally get behind the scenes previews and video teasers. If you enjoy live streaming, I can be found over on Twitch where I stream every Wednesday at 8 PM British time. For now, don't forget to drink your water, take your medication, be kind to yourselves, and I will see you all next time.